All right, good morning, everyone. For those of you who have just joined us or who joined us in the last 2 to 3 minutes, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time this morning. I know we all have a lot on our plate, so I really appreciate your commitment and dedication to assessment reporting, the use of results, and institutional effectiveness in general. My goal for this session is to work through this information in about 45 to 50 minutes and have time for Q&A at the end. As always, if there's a specific question that you would like to ask that pertains only to your program, your unit, your department, whatever that is, I'm happy to set up a one-on-one meeting. But also, there are no stupid questions. If you have a question about something, someone else is sure to have the same question, so please don't hesitate to ask questions if you have them. You can put them in the chat or save them for the end. So this is the second part in our IE Spring series. This is our introduction to assessment reporting and the use of results. This is offered by Institutional Effectiveness and Research. So what we talked about in our IE planning and planning for success session offered last week before last, is in general in assessment planning, we talked about how we plan for everything. We talked about how we plan for trips, buying a home, running a marathon. Assessment is no different. We covered the purpose and development of an assessment plan, the different pieces and consideration of those pieces, writing SLOs or student learning outcomes and goals, and the alignment of assessment methods with those SLOs and goals. To dig in a little bit deeper on an example we kind of touched on last session, but I want to explore a little bit more this session. If we think of things like New Year's resolutions, let's say you have a New Year's resolution to run a 5K. Planning for that, scheduling, training, all that stuff may be part of your assessment plan. After you've run your 5K though, if you take that time to sit down and think about what parts of the training worked, maybe running with music helped motivate you, maybe running with music really didn't work for you. Maybe a certain protein bar made you sick and so you switched to protein shakes. Maybe training on Mondays was better because you started your week with motivation, whatever that was. If you looked at all the pieces that went into what you consider to be success or not success, how they worked for you, and how you want to use them as you prepare for your next 5K, that is looking at and analyzing assessment results and how you're going to use them in the future. So as we're working through these slides and as you're thinking about assessment results and assessment planning, I understand that the language around this and sometimes thinking that far ahead can be maybe a little overwhelming. But if you simply think about the fact that this is stuff that you do every day, we're just kind of formalizing it, it becomes a little bit more approachable and a little bit more open. So briefly, the purpose of an assessment plan and results. Again, assessment is more than something that we do just once a year because I've emailed you or asked you to do it. An assessment plan articulates a program's process and timeline for conducting program assessment activities and for collecting, analyzing, and using program and support unit assessment data. Assessment plans also help communicate the various roles and responsibilities of leadership and faculty in assessment process. It can guide planning initiatives. It can help look at budget decisions. It can look at trend analysis. The very most basic reason to do assessment is because SAC COC tells us to do it. There's so much more that we can get out of it. Assessment, as explained by Wolfroad here, gives us several ways to gather, interpret, and use data to provide information we need to take action. So SAC COC just gets to read your assessment plan and results. You actually get to use it. So if you kind of adopt that mindset on thinking through how you want to plan for your success and support your students, again, it becomes a little bit more approachable and a little bit more open. So in our IE assessment forecom report, the format of this may be changing soon, but the results portion and the use of results that we're going to be talking about occur here in these last two columns: your reporting period, your follow-up on your previous year's action plan, and your action use of results. This is articulated through the different results rubrics that are used. And so we'll look at these a little bit closer later on. But the items that are included in the results and action use of result rubric include our results dated during the reporting year, our results aligned with the SLOs, assessment methods, and standard of success, or for support units aligned with goals, assessment methods, and standard of success. Is the sample or population size provided in equals, that type of stuff. So I'm not going to read through these exhaustively. The types of things that we're looking for in the results reporting that help add to that rich narrative are being, checked through the rubric. So when we're looking at the actual data that we have with our goals, I want to say assessment is not the same as research, nor does it need to be. The same rules don't always apply. However, it's important to select appropriate assessment methods that are aligned with what you're trying to measure in order to produce the most meaningful information that can be used for improvement purposes. So again, we're really looking at planning for success when we're analyzing our assessment goals and our assessment results. When you're analyzing your data for program assessment, so again, you've assessed, you've collected it, you've got this really rich data. Your goal is to make sense of the information. You want to understand what happened and what occurred. Summarize the information in a way that provides feedback on student mastery learning objectives, or for our support units, summarize the information in a way that provides feedback on services provided, or responds to questions that faculty or clients want answered. Provide information that informs faculty or service units as they decide how to respond to results, and document a clear plan for how the results can be used to seek improvement. This item right here, item 4, is that really kind of emphasis of continuous improvement, documenting that plan for how the results can be used to seek improvement. It's through our documentation simply that we remind ourselves what we're going to do and how we want to do it. So when we're looking at reporting assessment results, this top bullet here is kind of a shameless plug for our April session that will be coming up, which is about telling your story through assessment. So as you're reporting those assessment results, you're sitting down to Nuventive, you've blocked out 2 wonderful hours to type out what your students learned, the services provided, wherever that might be. You're telling your story. A few things to think through. Think about who will be reading your assessment results. Think about their needs, their perspectives, and their priorities. I know if you've attended prior sessions with me talking about continuous improvement and assessment work, this is really for you, but we're also writing for other people. So we want to make sure that they can understand what we're doing and that the data that we provide are supporting their needs and their perspective and their priorities. You might highlight interesting or unanticipated findings. So rather than simply saying 50% of students pass the test, highlight why that's interesting, or if that's unanticipated, maybe that's a really big drop, and you can provide that context around that change. You know your data best. Emphasize and explain any differences or changes. Again, if there's some kind of trend that you're seeing, if there's a deviation from the norm, someone that's reading this data or looking for it at it for the first time may not know to identify that, but you're going to be more familiar with what that looks like. And so you can provide that context around those differences or changes from prior years. And again, in general, provide context and helpful commentary. If you're simply reporting numbers, there's not really a story there. You want to build out that story around what you're reporting. Be clear and concise. I know that maybe goes a little against what I'm talking about with your story, but we might want to channel a little bit more Hemingway than Charles Dickens. So we don't necessarily want an entire essay over, what you've learned or what's been done, but we really want to focus in and target what occurred, want to highlight interesting or unanticipated findings, want to provide context and commentary. Another thing to keep in mind is that as you're writing, people that are reading this may not be familiar with industry-specific jargon or shortened terms that you are familiar with. So if you're using certain words or acronyms, be sure to spell them out. If you have a standardized test and you simply say, the industry test, you might want to include the name of that test, because also something that's helpful to think of, you're writing not only for people that are familiar with what you're doing, but people that come after you. So if you were an IE author for the first time looking at your IE results, what kind of helpful information would you want to see there that would have been able to help you in the beginning? Another thing to consider when you're reporting assessment results is prepare for feedback. Provide supporting information that illustrates alignment with the SLOs and goals. You want to document quality kind of preemptively. Document quality in your assessment strategy and your assessment method and your SLO or goal. Kind of maybe get ahead of the game by talking about why that particular strategy, method, or goal is really appropriately aligned and works well for what you're trying to measure or learn. And then simply, we're all human doing a human process. There might be flaws or there might be areas for improvement. And so this is a very human process, and just be open to the work that goes into that. This is not something that you are graded on. This is not something that should be used in a punitive manner. This is really an opportunity to learn and explore. So when we're looking at assessment results and we're thinking about comprehension, either for ourselves and others, one of the things I talked about is highlighting results related to that SLO or goal and the standard of success. We really want to include interpretation of the results. Again, like I said earlier, if you simply say 50% of the students passed the test, that doesn't really provide a lot of context or interpretation around what we're reading, what we're learning. So if you say 90% or n equals 10 passed the test, 85% of responses were positive, the time to completion decreased by 10 minutes on average, that may mean a lot to you in that moment, but that really isn't going to be expanding on what other people might be interested in learning. An opportunity to expand or some more appropriate results might be that 90% or 9 of the 10 students that took the test passed. This is slightly lower than prior years who experienced a 95% pass rate. They demonstrate consistent understanding. Again, I'm not going to read through all this for you, but you can see here that in these examples, we've covered more than just a simple reporting of the results. We've provided context and we've started to tell that story around what that data means for us and for others. In our example down here, where we're looking at survey responses for our service unit, said 85% of the 306 survey responses were positive. Though this meets and surpasses the standard of success, which is a 75% satisfaction rate, it's noted in the surveys people were consistently unsatisfied with fall training services and response time. And so something that this sample author has included is what they're going to be doing. They met in January 2024 to discuss findings. The CTO presented data that identified a decrease, and then they've talked about what they're going to be doing. So the instructor teaching these trainings was a new hire in August of 23. They themselves will be going through more trainings, one-on-one meetings with CTO, and additional instructional support. So rather than simply, again, reporting those numbers, they're telling us a story with the data. When we're looking at the type of data that we might include in our assessment results, you might have the number assessed, sample population size. Again, we want to expand on more than just that. You might include local methods of data. This includes a head count, percentage, or mean or average. This provides additional context to the numbers that were assessed or the base number that you saw. External or standardized methods, median, range, percentile, etc. Whatever it is that you need to help tell your story. And then when you look at the presentation of data, we have our narrative description that you saw earlier. You might include charts or graphs that help demonstrate trend, tables that help provide comprehensive analysis. When you're displaying data, you might have your current results and provide a breakdown of performance levels or historical comparison. One thing that we do not want to submit as representation of data is examples of student work, especially if it's identified by student name, whether that is in a table or chart or submitted as additional documentation. If you've done this in the past, if you've submitted completed examples of student work, I encourage you to remove them, and please do not submit them in the future, because that does open up to, I think, maybe FERPA issues. If you're documenting a change and you want to be able to provide that potential evidence, so again, I just talked about the type of data that you might include and documentation or evidence that you might include. If you have a change that you're documenting, a change may be like developing and implementing a new assignment to reinforce knowledge needed to achieve an outcome. The potential evidence or additional documentation that you can submit for that is the assignment or syllabus that shows how the new assignment figures into the course grade. If a change that you're making is adding a new textbook, you could include as evidence or in your discussion a screenshot of the book cover or a syllabus that includes the new book. If you have new laboratory equipment, you might include a purchase order. You have an increased instruction in library research as part of supporting student learning. You might include a syllabus that shows that additional library instruction. If you're adding a prerequisite to increase base knowledge, again, you might include curriculum forms or other types of things that have been submitted, maybe a screenshot of course leaf that shows the added prerequisite or catalog pages that demonstrate the new prerequisite. And then your discussion over the action use of results or in your result discussion itself could talk about how you anticipate that impacting the student learning. For our service units, same thing. If you're developing a new survey, if you're developing a new service, if you've made a new purchase, you might include a very similar potential evidence pieces either in your results discussion or in your documentation. We want to include evidence that indicated changes have occurred as we are working through and thinking through how we want to demonstrate and use our results data. Straightforward outcomes, pardon me, streamlined data collection, protocols that facilitate meaningful reflection. These are all evidence that changes were made. So as you're meeting and talking about these, or as you are working through and thinking through how you want to report your results and you want to provide evidence that changes were made, think through what might work best for you and what kind of evidence would make sense to you. So again, we were looked at earlier, and here's a little bit more detail. The types of items that we're looking for as we're reviewing the assessment results reported are the action use of results. So really strong results entries include the reporting gear, alignment with student learning outcomes or goals, assessment methods and standards of success. They provide the sample population size, the number assessed. They provide descriptive data, a head count, percent, average, median, mode, etc. They provide a discussion of results that are clear, concise, objective, and substantive. And then they correctly identify their conclusions, standard of success met or not met, that are aligned with the results provided. Our action use of results, that we are seeing action plans presented when needed. That's included when your standard of success is not met or inconclusive. For action use of results, we want actions that are clearly based on assessment results and assessment results being cited in the action itself. We want actions or use of results that are aligned with the learning outcomes or goals. Action plans that are clear and specific. And then the report clearly demonstrating closing the loop. So again, closing the loop, we're using the data that we've identified, we're using the data that we've analyzed, whatever that might be, and we're using it to inform our actions use of results and provide follow-up. So what we're going to look at next is some specific examples of each of these rubric items in reporting results or action use of results. So you'll kind of be able to see what that might look like in your reports themselves as you are preparing to work on those. Again, we encourage you to, rather than this being a once a year process, go in now or have gone in before and included your fall data, or sit down with your peers, your department, your unit, whatever that might be, with your fall data and begin to analyze and interpret it. Write out which you might want to include for your report. Again, any interesting findings, anything that has been highlighted, any changes, just things that kind of pique your interest. Write them out in a Word document if you're not quite ready to go into Inventive and add that, and just capture that there, and then half your work will be done. And then when you're done with your spring semester, your spring term, you can go back into that Word document, find what you identified for fall, add to it for the spring, and see if anything changed, if there's been any new trends, or anything that provided additional linkage or understanding between your two terms. Personally, that's what I do. I write my stuff out each term in a Word document, so I have it ready to add to Inventive when that opens up. I will also, the next couple of examples for our reporting results or assessment outcomes, action use of results assessment, we'll go back and forth between academic assessment examples and support unit assessment examples. So there'll be some for each of those. So when we're looking at results, reporting results, we want results that are aligned with goals, assessment methods, and the standard of success. You can see here in this example, the goal is that visitors to the university dining location will be able to access food that meets their dietary needs. The assessment method is a survey, and they've described the scale and the distribution here. The standard of success is that 80% of the respondents will agree or strongly agree they're able to access food at dining locations that meet their dietary needs. And here in the results discussion, this is something that could definitely be expanded on to provide additional context. But they do have here the alignment of the goal, the assessment method, and the standard of success. They've identified the survey, the total number that were completed, the number that agreed or indicate they agreed they were able to access food that meets their dietary needs. So it'd be very clear if you're reading this result, although there is not a ton of additional context of what exactly occurred and that it occurred in response to the goal and the survey being distributed. We're wanting to provide descriptive data. This includes headcount, percent, median, average, etc. So in this example, we have a student learning outcome that graduating students will be able to formulate a plan which incorporates alternative solutions to complex problems in a social environment context. This is assessed through a student evaluation evaluated by an internship supervisor. And their standard of success, that 85% of students will be rated a 3 or higher on their ability to formulate a plan. In the results, they do include the number of students in the internships, or N equals. They include that head count and the percent. 50% of interns were rated a 3 or higher. And then additionally, although it doesn't appear on the slide, they say that a breakdown of results by performance level appears in the attached table. So through the submission of that table, they provided additional descriptive data that a reviewer or a department head or someone from IE who is not familiar with the student evaluation or this particular learning outcome will be able to read and understand how that was demonstrated through the students in their internships, or how achievement, was demonstrated through the students through their internships. We want to provide that sample or population number. So again, N equals. So we're back to our survey example for dining locations. And so here they've identified that 584 surveys were completed. So we know exactly what this 64.55% is part of. So again, if you say, 90% of students that took the survey were satisfied, and it was only 5 students, there really isn't a representative population of the entire campus. But if you were to say that maybe 90% of the students enrolled in the class would have a maximum enrollment of 30 students, that would be more representative of that particular class. So by telling us how many were assessed or your N equal, it provides a lot of additional context around what those percentages mean. So this is just another example here for that learning outcome and the descriptive head count. So when we're looking at analyzing results, so now we've kind of moved on a little bit, we want results discussion to be clear, concise, objective, and substantive. So we're looking again at the survey. So if you'll remember, the total count here, 584 surveys, 64.5%. And our IE author has expanded on that. So they have now said, see attached documentation for a breakdown, and then provided an expanded discussion of results that are clear, concise, objective, and substantive. So for someone not familiar with this unit or their survey, they now know that the result falls below the standard of success and is similar to results from prior years. This still identifies an ongoing challenge in offering food that aligns with specific dietary needs, as well as helping visitors locate those foods when served. So this additional context is clear, concise, objective, and substantive. But again, the provision of this information really helps individuals not familiar understand what's going on. And their follow-up on the previous year's action plan entry, they included exactly what they did last year. So the dining services added 10 diet-specific menus to the rotation. While they've been well received, they haven't contributed to meeting the standard of success. But that additional context over what has been done in the past helps people understand how these results are to be interpreted and used.
Allison, Rachel had an interesting question in chat about, are the total numbers not important? So 584 surveys out of how many the survey was available to would seem to be important. Is it not important for reportings?
I think any additional information that you're comfortable providing, again, these are examples that we've drafted. They're not probably going to be perfect, or they might be missing 1 or 2 things, but any additional information that you can or want to provide that will help others understand the context around your assessment results would be really good. So, you can do the math here. The 64.5% of 584 would tell you, the number of respondents that indicate they agreed or strongly agreed. If you want to take that step and provide that for reviewers, that would be, or for anyone reading these results, that would be very helpful. That's something that we're really looking for, that N equals. So we're looking for your total population as well. But that additional piece of information, if you feel that would be helpful, or if that's the kind of thing that as you're looking at this, you realize that you would want to know, I definitely encourage you to include that.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Su. I can add a little point to that total number. So it's relevant. It really depends on your whole population and your sample size. When you have a huge population, a lot of times it's impossible for you to get all the people to respond to your survey. So we're looking at 20 or 30%. That's pretty representative. But if you have a total number of 10 in your population, for example, if you're teaching a class of 10, every single response you're missing becomes very sensitive to your average. So in that sense, you will have to get it all. So it really depends how big your population is. So yes, back to your question, it's good information for you to include the whole total number, regardless whatever situation. So that gives you the kind of picture when you look at the results and make that a judgmental call if your responses here are representative or not for the results you are providing. That's a good question.
Thank you, Dr. Sue.
You're welcome.
So when we're going on to look at additional rubric items, results, conclusion, identified, standard success, not met, not met, or inconclusive, aligned with the results. So in this example, we're looking at a standard of success where 85% of students will be rated a 3 or higher on the ability to formulate a plan. They've identified that the standard of success was not met. And so the results discussion includes that total number of students in internships, the percent that were rated a 3 or higher, the percent that were rated within that standard of success, and then a discussion of what that means. And so as you're reading through this result, if you were to come back up here and perhaps this conclusion were to say, standard of success met, you would be able to identify that 50% were rated 3 or higher, which is not aligned with what they've identified up here. So in correctly identifying the conclusion, it provides that additional insight into into exactly what has happened and what you will be doing with that information. So as you're looking at your action use of results, so we've collected our data, we've reported our results, we provided that rich context around what that means, we've identified our N equals, our total population, our percent breakdown, all that really good data. And now we're moving on to looking at our action use of results. Some things to ask yourself or to ask your peers as you meet to discuss these. Some kind of thought-provoking questions or things that might spur on additional thought around your actions is based on what I or we know now. What am I or what are we going to do to improve practices? So a simple question, now that we know what we know, what are we going to do with it? You might then proceed through who needs to be part of these decisions, who's responsible for implementing and checking those changes, maybe who's tracking if you're purchasing a new textbook, if you're adding a new survey, if you're adding a new service, who's responsible for doing that and who's responsible for following up to make sure it was done. And then who's responsible for reporting back to the department? What exactly will be taking place to make these improvements? Again, saying that you're going to add a textbook is relatively straightforward, but talking about the impact that has or how you're going to be using that change might be a little bit more in depth. And so we want to ensure that you can explain those changes well and clearly. What resources or support are needed to make this work or improvement, to support this work or improvement? When will changes or updates, revisions, etc. be initially implemented? When will they be checked or confirmed? So if you're phasing in different changes or if you're doing something that will require periodic follow-up, to simply map out what those dates or those times might look like and put someone in charge of doing that. Where in the academic program or unit services will the changes be implemented or included? Is it one particular course? Is it a capstone experience? Is it at the beginning of the fall? Is it a student leadership training or whatever that might be? Identify where those will be occurring. And then what does that look like for the other pieces or people involved? If you're making a changes, what kind of ripple effect or impact can that have for things that you may not be identified, or that may not be identified, or you may not be thinking of now? And then finally, kind of a big comprehensive question of why is this important? Why did we decide to focus on this particular issue and what impact will it have throughout the college or division? Again, not every change has to be groundbreaking or revolutionary. We don't need to be reinventing the wheel every single semester. If you're making a change, it doesn't have to totally rewrite the curriculum of your program or totally revise the mission of your unit, but simply think through why is this important? And it might be little things. It might be supporting our online students. It might be supporting or helping people find dietary foods that meet their dietary restrictions, which might seem relatively small as you're sitting down to look at it, but can have a big impact and be very important to those people that are touched by it. So again, some helpful discussion questions to think through by yourself or with your peers. These can help kind of start conversations as you're looking at your assessment results. These can kind of help prompt or provide insight into what you want to do with them and help build out your action or use of results. If you have a standard of success that was not met or inconclusive, you might be asking yourself, what now? Like, I found this data, I didn't meet my standard of success again. That's not something that like you are in trouble for. This is simply how assessment goes. But using that data, the discussion, student feedbacks, industry guidance, peers, etc., whatever you're using, you might look at some changes to curriculum. These might look at revision or enforcement of prerequisites or other requirements. This could look like a revision of course sequences or content, the addition or deletion of courses. Again, these are maybe a little bit more substantive or kind of higher level when we're looking at changes to curriculum, but these might be things to consider. If your support unit and your standard of success is not met or inconclusive, you might look at some changes to practices. This might be the revision or enforcement of prerequisites or requirements, a revision of the order or types of offering or services. Maybe you've been focused on offering professional development that is solely dedicated to teaching people how to climb a rock wall. Maybe people know how to do that, but now they're interested in learning how to belay. You might change that type of offering or service to people. And then the addition or deletion of offering or services. If there's a service that you're providing that's no longer needed, you can maybe look at phasing that out and using something else. So again, standard success not met or inconclusive. If you're looking at changes to academic or support processes, so we're maybe kind of scaling back a little bit, we're looking at changing our process or what we do. This might look like an improvement or change in technology, maybe a change in personnel. Maybe you need to add or phase in a new program coordinator or a new position to oversee a specific process and financial aid, something like that. You might look at adding additional training or professional development, especially if you are trying to change a behavior or change a learning in a certain population. For institutional effectiveness, one of the things that we talked about that we're doing is that we've added in these additional kind of 101 trainings to help support assessment processes. So when we looked at our assessment results, one of the things that we wanted to do was make a change to our support processes by adding additional training and professional development. So this is the type of thing that we'd be collecting data on and reporting back on for ourselves. Another change to academic or support processes that you might make is a revision of advising, training standards or processes, or maybe a revision of admission or support criteria. And so again, when we say admission, that might look like only academic processes, but if you're a support unit that offers this type of training, you might look at, are the people that are being trained the right type of people? If you're consistently receiving feedback that maybe doesn't align with the learning outcomes that you're trying to train people on, you might want to check to make sure that your outcomes align with what you are trying to accomplish, or that you're working with the right population. A final step that we might take, this may be kind of a last step because we've tried everything else, is maybe your changes to your assessment plan. This is, again, really a final step that we want to take if we've really looked at everything else. We've looked at updating curriculum, we've looked at adding new technology, we've looked at revising practices, and changes to an assessment plan might look like the revision or addition of a new SLO or goal, the revision or addition of a new assessment method, revision or addition of a new standard of success, or maybe the collection of additional assessment data. Again, simply changing how we are assessing something or how we are collecting that data really should be a last step, because it's not telling us a whole lot about the learning or the services being provided so much as it is changing the process that we're using to analyze it. If you've made any of those changes and you want to track them, a question that I get a lot is, how do I track this, or what do I do to track this information? And so I encourage you to make it as simple and easy on yourself as possible. You could create a table like this in the background. You might detail the improvement or the change being made, a description of that improvement or change to help not only jog your own memory, but make it easy for you to provide that context when you're writing about it in your assessment report. Who is accountable or responsible for making that change? If you have a particular faculty member that's responsible for identifying the textbook, or support unit person that is responsible for creating the new survey or revising survey questions, you might include them here simply so you know who to follow up on. And then date to be completed. The use of a tracking table will really help you collect and follow that data. You could add a calendar reminder to your Outlook calendar or your phone or whatever that is, that maybe helps remind you of, oh yeah, like this is the day that I wanted to sit down and look at my test questions and make sure that they align with what I'm really trying to achieve in my class. Or this is the day that I want to sit down and check our data log to make sure that we are responding to things in a timely manner. You could put discussions for identifying changes on, if you have standing monthly or weekly meetings, you can add them to your agenda. Maybe you can start or end your meetings with talking about assessment, whether that's student learning outcomes or goals. It doesn't have to be exhaustive and it doesn't have to be a one-time thing. You could take 5 to 10 minutes from your meeting to simply talk about what have we learned and what do we want to do about it. And those types of discussions can help build out, again, that really rich data and that really rich narrative. I know that this might be a little bit of a silly picture, but if you have a fun way that you want to track implementation, or if you want to track changes, maybe you do want to, build a giant thermometer that you can color in that you want to track for every survey completed or for every test passed, wherever that is, however you want to track it to make it accessible and open to yourself. We're supportive of that. If you want additional ideas, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to help review and talk about them with you. So let's say that you've had a standard of success that was met. Now what? So start off by celebrating. This is really a great thing to celebrate. You've met that standard of success. You've had a great time. Your students have learned, or your services were rendered correctly. That's awesome. But the idea of continuous improvement is that there's always ways to grow. So maybe consider setting a more challenging goal or target. Look at other improvements wanted. Think through other feedback received, especially if you have a survey. If you've met your standard of success and everyone was really happy, but you have collected some qualitative data that talked about certain services or provisions that are needed, look at how you can support those requests. Consider populations that did not perform as expected and how they can be supported. So if you're looking at a capstone experience or a curricular change where students, maybe 90% of your students, were successfully rated or completed a rubric for a capstone experience really well, but maybe your online students didn't do quite as well, how can you support those online students? And think through those. What other remaining, 10%, 5%, or whatever that did not meet the standard of success, what can be done to help or support those students or those individuals? So celebrate, take that time, and then think through what else you can do. A really good question. Even if you meet your standard of success, what do the results mean to you or tell you, and how will you use them? So you've met your standard of success, and sit down and think through what that really means and the impact that that has on your program or unit. So we're going to look through some examples next of the action use of result statements in line with the rubric. These are things that are going to be helpful in thinking through how you might want to articulate or write your action use of result statements for your upcoming cycle. So as we're looking at rubric item here, action plans are clearly based on assessment results, and assessment results are cited in the action. Again, we're really looking for alignment here between your results and the actions being, the actions of results being detailed. So in this example, it says because results show that only 50% of students are achieving the mastery of the SLO, the NRMT curriculum committee met to review a curriculum map and identify 2 additional required courses where content related to the plan formulation can be added. So here we've really aligned with the results. We talked about 50% of those interns are rated 3 or higher. Here's the courses where that took place. Here's a course where faculty were looking at creating and documenting those resource plans. And so here we really see the alignment and have ensured that what we're talking about in this action use of results, the 50% of students achieving mastery, the NRMT curriculum, definitely aligns with the results in the follow-up that we've identified and talked about earlier. We're looking at actions being aligned with the learning outcomes or the goals. So again, where we're talking about faculty identify 2 additional required courses where content related to plan formulations can be added. Our learning outcome here is that graduating students will be able to formulate that plan that incorporates alternative solutions to complex problems in social environment context. So through the identification of the courses and the content, we're drawing strong alignment between the learning outcome or their goal and the action use of results that's being discussed. If you're on our support unit side, you might talk about a survey alignment with maybe the goal for the supporting dietary needs and identifying the actions that you want to take through supporting those dietary needs. You're linking that back to your goal. So right here, actions aligned with goals is, as an example, I should have clicked a second ago, apologies. Our goal is that visitors to university dining locations will be able to access food that meets their dietary needs. And so this action use of results statement, they do talk about here, in our results, we identify that 64.55% of respondents. So there's strong alignment there. And then they go on to say that despite recent steps taken to add diet-specific menus, dining services will engage with marketing in a campaign to better advertise those menus. And so we've drawn strong alignment between what they want to accomplish, that they want visitors to university dining locations to be able to access food that meets their dietary needs, and what they're going to do. They're going to increase advertising and hopefully increase engagement with those items there. So there's strong alignment between what they're hoping to achieve and what they plan to do. We're looking for action plans that are specific and clear. They identify who's responsible, what's going to be done, when it will be implemented, where, and how it will be implemented. So you'll see there that those items, align strongly with those questions that we talked about earlier that you might ask yourself or ask your peers as you're talking through these different things. We have all this really rich data. Now, what are we going to do with it? So in this action plan, they talk about the NRMT 520 class will add a case study problem that will include a planning component. NRMT 524 will adopt a new textbook. The change will be implemented beginning fall 2020. Program coordinators are responsible for working with those course instructors. So they've identified, those big who, what, when, where, why. And additionally, if they were to leave that IE author role or were to take a role in another institution, it's very clearly articulated and identified here what will be occurring, when, and where it will be occurring. So someone else coming into that role will know what to do or what is being done. And it will make it all that much easier to follow up on that for the next year. So again, those details are really not only building out that rich story, but helping yourself and your peers in understanding what is coming or what's being done. So in completing your IE report, again, we're looking here at our assessment results and our action use of results. The details that you provide in these spaces will really help provide evidence of seeking improvement based on analysis of results. They're going to be really important to that idea of continuous improvement, and details themselves are important. What you share in your assessment plan, as I said before, will help you, your peers, IE, and the institution better understand what's going on. This is that opportunity to tell your story and to share what you are doing. So you've gone through, you have created your assessment plan, you have collected your data, your assessment data, you've analyzed it, you created an action use of results plan, you've talked about it with your peers, all that kind of stuff, and now what? We're going to repeat the cycle. So our cycle of assessment, we're going to identify expected outcomes, identify those measures. Here's your assessment planning items. You're going to identify, you're going to assess the achievement of those outcomes. And then we're going to kind of come into our results here. So our results reporting, we're going to analyze those results. We're going to use those results for improvement, and then we're going to repeat the cycle. So as you're looking at this, you might ask yourself, or based on what you learn and discover, ask, what do you need to know? What do you need to know to improve this cycle or improve these functions in the future? You can start over in the cycle, by asking yourself this question and creating a plan to answer that question. We definitely encourage you to rely on others. You are not an island unto yourself. IE is here to assist you, but you have other peers or individuals in your department, your unit that are part of this process as well. As I said before, identify ways to make it easy on yourself. Set reminders, put it on an agenda. I have reminders on my calendar that I use to prompt myself. I have sticky notes all over my computer. When I meet with my institutional effectiveness team, we talk about our personal goals as well as IE goals at least once a month. And so we really try to find ways to make this accessible and set as a reminder. Make it easy on ourselves and set reminders to help prompt ourselves. So there's two phrases that always come to mind when I think of assessment. One of them is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I understand that assessment might seem like a large scale project or a little overwhelming. Just take it one step at a time. Speak with others, meet with people that have been doing this for a while, schedule a meeting with institutional effectiveness, do some research on your own, talk with peers from other institutions, find ways to ease yourself into it. You don't have to, jump in and do all of it in 1 week, especially if you start now. You can kind of scale in appropriately or find the best way to learn about this that works for you. Again, like I said, you are not alone in this. We are here to support you, and you have peers at institution that are here to support you. Another phrase that comes to mind with assessment is that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with 1 step. So again, just take that first step. Even if you just want to rewatch this recording, if you just want to look at the resources that are on the institutional effectiveness page, if you just want to Google what is academic assessment and just read up on some base information, whatever that is, just take that first step. We're here to support you. You're not alone in this. So talking about steps, this slide might look familiar. I've added a few things to this though. So we are here in the spring. You think about, what am I going to be doing now? What next steps can I take? It's probably going to start with discussion. If you're looking back at your fall data, if you're planning how to collect your spring data, if you're already thinking about the things that you want to explore as you're looking at your academic year data, whatever that is, that's probably going to result in a certain level of discussion or amount of discussion, either amongst your peers or your department. You might have a thoughtful review of your current assessment plan and your assessment results. So I've added in those assessment results items now. You might simply sit down on your own and look at what you collected and just think through it. Again, ask yourselves those questions. What does this mean to me? Why is this important? What do I want to do with this? Who do I need to talk to, or who needs to be involved in these discussions? You might have some additional research and findings. So you might go out again and research other institutions, industry standards, what are other schools doing, that type of thing. Have a discussion of those results and implications with your peers. Have a discussion of next steps and use of results. Ask yourself, how did these results that we've gotten, how does this assessment data that we've collected impact the process of assessment? What does this mean in the larger idea of what we're doing to collect student learning outcome or support unit data? You might meet with an IE team member. We're all happy to meet with you. We're all more than welcome, or you are all more than welcome to come join us in our office and talk. This will probably result in some more discussion. And then you're going to conclude that with updating things in Uventive. So you've gone through and done all of this. We really want the pre-work to occur with your program or unit before you start putting things into Uventive. Because again, you are not an island unto yourself. A lot of that discussion will help provide that really rich context and that story that you're going to be including in Uventive as you update and conclude your IE reporting. As I said during the assessment planning session, a lot of these discussions tend to go really well with coffee and cookies. So I definitely encourage you to get some coffee and cookies for those meetings as you're sitting down. Assessment and chocolate chip cookies, or whatever your favorite cookie is, those go really well together. We have available resources on our institutional effectiveness webpage. So you can navigate to tmuc.edu/IER or /IE. Navigate to assessment and then internal resources for program and unit assessment. We have guides in the slides that will be added after this session there that talk you through how to write SLOs or goals, how to write assessment methods, collecting and analyzing data, and continuous improvement. We do have our final upcoming session of the IE Spring Series later in April. You'll remember my shameless plug for that earlier. This is going to be on April 25th, Assessment of Storytelling. This one will be a face-to-face session offered in RSC dedication in the afternoon. You can register for that now at any time or join us if you're not able to pre-register. And then finally, like I talked about, we continue to assess ourselves and our services and our trainings as well. If you'll take a few moments to pull out your smartphone, scan this QR code, and share your feedback, we would greatly appreciate it. As I mentioned, this is a new series that we're offering. So any feedback that you have on improvements or things that you wanted to see, maybe there's something you had hoped that I would discuss that I didn't touch on that you would like to have included in the future, anything like that, we would be more than happy to, or we are very happy to hear, and then we'd be more than happy to discuss with you if you would like, if you're open to that. So thank you so much for your time today. We have concluded with perfect about 10 minutes left. So there is time for Q&A. Again, there is no such thing as a stupid question. But if you would like to wait until the end or meet with an IE team member one-on-one to discuss your question, I will be available for about the next 10 to 15 minutes for that as well. So thank you all so much for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful Blue and Gold Wednesday.